Okay, I really just want to thank everyone for coming to the event. I want to thank all of the speakers, Dr. Webbles, Vince Gaddis, Mavis Bates, and Madison Hahami. I'm sorry. And Mary Sheshkri. And I wanted to thank all the groups that helped us. Progressives of Kane County, obviously, the local DSA, the local Sierra Club in the Fox Valley area, Jobs with Justice, Northern Illinois Jobs with Justice, and the local Methodist Unitarian Church. Okay. And I just think it's important for our representatives to take the most aggressive policy that we have out there in fixing the climate crisis, because Democrats that deny the climate emergency are just as bad as Republicans that deny climate change. So with that, I just want to start with the speakers. We have Dr. Don Wobbles first. He is an expert in aspheric physics and chemistry with over 500 scientific publications related to Earth's climate, air quality, and the stratospheric ozone layer. He has co-authored a number of international and national scientific assessments, including those by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. He has helped lead the 2013 IPCC International Assessment of Climate Science and the 2004 U.S. National Climate Assessment. He is currently co-leading a special report assessing the science of climate change as a prelude to the 4th U.S. National Climate Assessment, and is a leading chapter in the NCA4. He has received many awards, too many to list. Don and his wife, Barbara, have been married for 47 years and have 3 sons and 4 grandchildren. And Don grew up on a farm near how do you say that? Carl, Illinois. Thank you, Don.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No problem. I just happened to close my thing accidentally.
Oh,
This will come up a little bit too if you need to. Sorry, I'll let you.
That's all right. Oops. Well, thanks everybody for coming. What I'm going to do is talk about the issue of climate change, and particularly I'm going to talk about the findings from the most recent National Climate Assessment. I led Volume 1 of the 4th National Climate Assessment. This is a report required by Congress that was based on the Global Change Act of 1990, actually signed by the first President Bush in 1992, and it requires that every so often we should, and it should be every 4 years, but it hasn't always been, hasn't always happened that way, that we should have an assessment of what is happening to the Earth's climate, and what does that mean particularly to the United States, both in terms of the science and the resulting impacts on our society. And so that kind of sets the stage for looking at what's going on. Now, I thought maybe I would start with a quote from an old friend of mine, Sir David King. Sir David was the head of the chemistry department at Cambridge University for a number of years, and then became the chief scientist for the UK under 2 different prime ministers of the UK. And a few years ago, in talking about climate change, he says this is not only the biggest challenge of our time, this is the biggest challenge of all time. Something we all need to be taking very seriously. It's not only affecting us now, and it is affecting us. I don't think people always feel that, but it is happening. And it's farmers this year particularly feeling it in the Midwest because they haven't been able to get in their fields to plant the crops until very recently. but just clearly one of the most important issues. I often get attacked by those who don't want to accept the science, and as a result, sometimes I get asked to give debates, to be in a part of a debate about climate change. And I always say no, because there is no debate about the science. If you read the science, over 97% of the papers talk about how important this issue is. There's 12,000 papers a year written about climate change. And over 97. And those extra few percent, if you actually analyze them, you find out those are just garbage papers that never have appeared in the literature in the first place. There's a few rogue journals, and that's where they tend to appear. And so it really is nearly unanimous. And so there is no debate. Instead, what we should be debating about is the solutions. All people in the United States should be debating about how do we solve this problem before it really becomes devastating to us and to the other people around the world. So what is happening with our climate? Our climate is changing. It's changing extremely rapidly. In fact, it's changing about 10 times more rapidly than nature tends to change the climate. So if you look at the changes over the last century, and we now have temperatures we probably have not seen in at least the last 10,000 years, and perhaps much, much longer, so it's really outside of the experience of humanity since we've had society as we know it. And because it's changing so rapidly, it's very difficult for humans and for nature to adapt to those changes. That's why it is so urgent, because it will have so many impacts. I always get asked, in fact, there was a recent AAAS in their blog where they asked people to comment on things. Somebody asked, well, why don't we focus on the things that are positive about climate change? So I told them, and then I got attacked afterwards because I did this. I sent in a response, and I said, well, that's well and good, but we actually tried to do that in the National Climate Assessment, and we found out there just wasn't much. And the reason is because it's changing so rapidly. And so even if you find a few cold things, that there are good things, like there was less cold winters overall, then that has a response because fruit trees can't, as an example, may not get enough days when you're going to produce enough cherries or whatever. So there's always a negative side to the things you think are good. My big concern, I've been doing a lot of papers on this, is what's happening to severe weather. Severe weather is becoming more intense. We're getting more heat waves, so more multiple days of extreme heat. When we get more precipitation, and overall we're seeing a shift in precipitation. So here in the Midwest, we're seeing more precipitation we've had in the past, particularly in winter and spring, and drier summers overall. But more of that precipitation, when it comes anywhere in the world, is essentially coming as a larger event. Basically, a warmer atmosphere holds more water vapor. That's basic physics. And so it's not surprising that when you get more rain, or you get snow, that it'd be likely to be a larger event. Well, that's leading to more flooding when that occurs. And because of the shift in precipitation, we're also the drier tending to get drier. So we've got the growing concerns about drought in certain parts of our country and many parts of other parts of the world as well. And we could talk about a number of other things. Storms are getting more intense, hurricanes. This is a new finding based on one of my students, that hail is likely to become more intense as we're going forward. We don't have very good data on hail, but that's the indications. Sea levels are rising. So far, they've risen about 7 to 8 inches over the last century. But we're seeing an acceleration in the rise. It used to be about a little over 1 millimeter per year increase through most of last century in terms of the rate of increase. Now it's rising rising by more than 3 millimeters per year, and we expect it to further accelerate. If you've been hearing the news lately, we're seeing highly unusual melting going on in Greenland and Antarctica. One of the big concerns, as I'll talk about in a second, is what's going on in West Antarctica. Now, as we look at the projections forward, over this century, we expect another 1 to 4 feet of sea level rise. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it will be devastating to many of our coastlines if we get as much as 2 to 3 feet. Yet, we can't for sure say that the risk isn't as high as 8 feet because of what's going on in West Antarctica, where the ice in the ocean that's holding up the glaciers in West Antarctica is melting rapidly. And there's a lot of concerns in the science community that if that goes, the glaciers are going to go, and that could rise sea levels up to 8 feet this century and much more than that over the next century. So it's going to be interesting to wait and see what happens there. Well, why are these things, and we're seeing a lot of other effects in the ocean, by the way. The oceans are warming. The ocean circulation is slowing down. It's not likely to stop this century, but it could in future centuries. Likely to have a big impact on the life in the ocean. The other factor is that reason for the increase is primarily because of the changing climate is because of our burning of fossil fuels and land use change. It's increasing the amount of carbon dioxide and methane and other gases and particles in the atmosphere, and that's driving changes. Well, 25% of that increased amount of CO2 in the atmosphere goes into the oceans, and it's acidifying the oceans. It's making the oceans less basic. Well, that's having an effect already on shellfish. That extra little bit of acidity is having an effect. Well, how is that going to feed through the food chain in the oceans is not clear yet. Biologists are very worried about that. So we could go on and talk about the temperature change we've seen. So far, it's only been about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. We expect it could be as high as 8 to 10 degrees or so over this century if we continue the pathway we're on right now with the emissions of carbon dioxide and methane, et cetera. The president has called the high scenario that we look at a range of scenarios when we do these assessments. But the high scenario, they said, we shouldn't be looking at that. That's unrealistic. Well, right now, that's the pathway we're on. So I think it is realistic to look at that because the question is, what is the world going to choose to do? What are the people going to choose for future emissions? So if we follow that pathway, we're talking about an extremely large effect. This is globally and annually averaged, and a similar amount happening in the U.S. But why is that important? It's averaged, globally and annually, but it ends up that if you went back and looked at the last ice age, that was about 15 degrees Fahrenheit colder than now. And what did we have then? We had hundreds of feet of ice above where we're standing right now. So that was a very different climate at 15 degrees. So if we're talking about 1.8 degrees now, that's already a big change in terms of a warming. And by the end of the century, we could be talking about something as high as something comparable to the kind of cold that we had 20,000 years ago. One of the things we know is that the climate will continue to change because we cannot totally stop this. But we have choices. We basically have the choice to mitigate, to try to manage the unavoidable, to avoid the unmanageable. So we can mitigate, reduce emissions. And there's a number of ways we can do that. We can manage the unavoidable, which means we have to adapt, or we can suffer. And right now, we're doing all three. Our choice for the future is which of those are we going to put our efforts in. We really need to both mitigate and adapt because that is what we're faced with. There are many things we can do as individuals. probably the most important single thing is to make sure that our representatives are well aware of the importance of this issue so they start really doing something about it at the local, state, and national levels, and world levels. And how you vote makes a big difference. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir here because I think you all know how you're going to deal with this, but this is very important, and in fact, it could have as much as a 3 to 10% effect on our national domestic product over this century, which may not sound like much, but that would be a big factor in looking at the future economy of our nation. I'll leave it there and be happy to address anything you might have in the way of questions. Yes. So if you talk with different congressmen and senators, you'll find different answers to that question. I recently met with Sean Casten, for example, who was just voted in this last year, and I helped Sean answer a lot of questions while he was running for Congress. And he and others in the House have really taken it upon themselves to form a new climate caucus, and they're really trying to push this. Next month, I just led a special assessment of the impacts of climate change on the Great Lakes, and I'm going to D.C. in July, early July, to they've arranged briefings for the House and for the Senate. Now, who will show up? Some Democrats will show up, probably likely no Republicans, because that's typically what happens. Although I've been in a few of these things where a few Republicans hide in a corner of the room. But sometimes they do show up. And it's unfortunate, even when you do a testifying before a committee, often the other party doesn't show up for the testifying. But nonetheless, we're going to be doing this special briefing for them on the Great Lakes and climate and what it means to the American people and why we need to be acting. Yes.
Can you describe what your function was with the Obama administration?
Yeah, it didn't get mentioned in my bio, but I was at the White House the last 2 years of President Obama's term, and I was asked to be there by the President's science advisor, John Holdren. John called me in my office at the university one day asking me that he needed me at the White House, and my function was I was the climate science expert for the White House as they were developing the policies such as the Paris Agreement that were then put into place. Yes.
Sounds like to me our biggest problem is educating our leaders. If they can't show up to listen to you, how long is that speech going to take out of their lives? And aren't we paying them a huge amount of our tax dollars for a job that I wonder if half of them are spending 40 hours a week at?
Well,
Plus getting a hell of a retirement that I can't earn.
yeah.
They need to go there, and we need to protest every single representative and listen to you.
Yeah. Based on everything I've seen, they do put in long hours, but I offered actually to bring in a group of major experts. I led volume 1 of the last National Climate Assessments, which is on the science of climate change. Right after we published that, I offered to bring in experts to the House and the Senate, half a dozen people that we would to give a major briefing to them on climate change, and I basically was told there was no interest. So, yeah, so that's the way it was. Yes. So let me tell you a bit about the Paris Agreement. When we were building the Paris Agreement, the folks at the Department of State, I thought were really smart, and they're the ones that did this, built in a clause into the Paris Agreement that no country could leave the agreement for 4 years. Well, you can guess why that was put in. And so at this point, the U.S. really has not withdrawn, despite any statements you hear otherwise, because it can't. Now, if this administration gets reelected, they could withdraw from it. I think it would be very foolish, and there's a lot of senators on both sides of the aisle that feel it's important that we continue within the Paris Agreement. I don't know much about this new thing, so I can't really comment upon it. Was this out of the House? Yeah, the problem is, as you know, we have a leader of the Senate who will do nothing. And so it'll be blocked. Yes. Many were planted in the last few weeks, so you're starting to see seeds coming up now. But oh no, I agree, and we're going to see more of that because, as I said, more precipitation coming in the spring as larger events, and a lot more precipitation in general. It's going to lead to more of these kind of things. And then the farmers are going to. I'm a farm boy. I grew up in Southern Illinois on a farm. I always like to say my dad loved farming. And I learned at an early age that was too much work, so decided to use my mind to go into science. But then we're going to get into the summers, which are expected to be drier. So you got warmer atmosphere, tending to lead to more evaporation, drier soils, and then on top of that, less rainfall. It could result in a significant decrease in farm yields by mid-century. In the National Climate Assessment, we said the reduction could be 10 to 30%. I've been part of papers where we said it actually could be as high as 50%. Well, at the same time, farmers are feeling like they're going to feed the world because we've got growing population. We have to produce more, and a lot of new genetic development starts trying to do that, but the climate may undo a lot of the things that they're trying to do. Yeah. Yeah. So I've long said that we need to consider nuclear power. Now, people are always asking, well, isn't it just hopeless? And I'd say no. I think that the revolution in energy and transportation has started. It's just that we're at the very beginning of it. So we have not seen, hopefully over the next decade, we really need to be doing a lot, and hopefully we'll be making large transition in our energy. Renewables are going to be a big part of that. Solar and wind, just in the last year, have gotten to be as cheap, if not cheaper, than natural gas. And all three of those are much cheaper than coal. So coal doesn't make any sense economically anymore. And both solar and wind are going to get cheaper yet. So that's going to be a win-win. Geothermal is important, and I think nuclear is important. But I don't think it's traditional nuclear that's going to be important. I think it's going to be the new smaller reactors that are being developed that are probably going to change the whole nature of nuclear. I guess I don't feel that, but maybe that's because I'm being interviewed about a couple times a day, typically anymore. So I'm seeing articles all the time talking about the urgency of climate change and what's happening around the world. So I don't think it's that way. I think the public are largely ignoring it. But I don't blame the media. I think the media is capturing. Now, there's certain media, such as the editorial pages of the Wall Street Journal, that always publish only the things that are kind of anti-environment. And when I and my colleagues try to publish something there, they ignore it, and it never gets seen. So that is an issue. But in general, I think the media is actually, kind of taking this on as one of the things that are important. So, I'm basing that on the fact that I see papers and listen to media from all over the world almost every day. So I actually yesterday I did a live TV program on a thing called RT America. Well, when we released the Great Lakes Assessment 2 months ago, I did interviews with NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox, and almost everybody. So they were covering it. Now, yeah, they don't bring it up every day, but I don't feel that they've been ignoring it myself. Yeah. Is that it? Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So how much damage do you think was done at that time by the US not signing on?
Oh, please. I'm going to save you from that one.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a difficult one.
Okay,
I'll
sure.
leave it at that. I can talk to you soon.
Hey everybody, want to thank Dr. Webbles for coming out here. He's got to be back to Champaign, big drive, and made a real treat for all of us. Thank you so much for coming out. Another person who has to just kind of pop up here real quick and come in and get out is Mary Shesgreen. She's the chair of Northern Illinois Jobs with Justice. She works with Fox Valley Citizens for Peace and Justice, Occupy Elgin, Save Our Illinois Land. She comes out of the anti-war movement and has expanded that range of interest to include the class war being waged on the middle class and the poor all across the globe. She's interested in fighting for the rights of working people everywhere, against economic inequality, and now, most urgently, the climate crisis. What unites all these interests is, in every instance, a small group of people, the 1%, wealthy, powerful group of people, are doing terrible damage to our world and to the people who live in it. Mary wants to fight back. She also has to get up to Elgin, so give her a few minutes here. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Dr. Webbles. So today I'm speaking on behalf of an organization called Soil Save Our Illinois Land. Soil exists to fight new fossil fuel infrastructure in Illinois, meaning fracking wells and pipelines, oil and gas pipelines. There is a Canadian company named Enbridge, which is a pipeline company. They already own and operate a big network of oil pipelines all across Illinois. I was oblivious to this fact until about 4 years ago, when I began to think for the first time about where does this oil come from that I'm putting into my gas tank. Enbridge's pipelines, several of them, are tar sands oil pipelines. That's tar sands from Alberta, Canada, which is the dirtiest kind of fossil fuel imaginable. From the way it is extracted from the ground, the amount of water that is used to extract it from the ground, and then in its transportation and in its refining and when you finally sell it and people burn it. Tar sands oil is a really terrible kind of fossil fuel, a terrible kind of petroleum, which never should have been extracted from the ground. Enbridge, the company, has a terrible history of leaks and spills in its pipeline. It's responsible for the 2010 Kalamazoo oil spill, which was the largest inland oil spill in U.S. history. And they have not been very responsible about protecting the pipelines and cleaning up the pipelines. They claim the Kalamazoo River is cleaned up. People who live there say it's still dangerously dirty. Enbridge has a pipeline that comes down through Minnesota, through Wisconsin, and through 4 Illinois counties, Boone, DeKalb, LaSalle, and Livingston County. They want to build a twin to that pipeline, and they want to build it soon. They tell their investors, this is going to be a great investment for you. They tell landowners along the path of the pipeline, well, we haven't decided yet whether we're going to build this pipeline or not. So they keep it very tentative. They are very elusive about their intentions. Soil exists mainly to try to stop that pipeline from being built. And people ask us, why don't you just wait till they make their application, and then we will all know they're going to do this, and we can fight them then. And our reason is that as we look at the history, we find that they don't make application till they've got all their ducks in a row, and they've got all the politicians on their side pretty much, and they've got momentum, and they've already talked to landowners. So we are trying to act to discourage them before they ever get started. You will hear about Line 3 in Minnesota, I hope. Line 3 is the beginning of this Enbridge pipeline as it enters the United States. Our allies in Minnesota are fighting Line 3 with all their hearts and with great imagination. They're planning to have what they call a very large event in Minnesota in September, a huge demonstration to try to stop Line 3. And Line 3 is currently being held up by lawsuits, and we wish those lawsuits well. And in that case, they have the governor on the side of the pipeline fighters. Not as strong as we want him, but he's on their side. We are trying to reach out to Governor Pritzker. So far, we have not been able to get a meeting with him. We've been trying to reach out to our state representatives. Some of them are with us, but some of them are afraid. We've been trying to reach out to members of Congress, and so I'm here today to challenge Bill Foster. Will you help us stop this pipeline or not? Now, what does this have to do with the Green New Deal? The Green New Deal is a wonderful, right now it's just a resolution. It hasn't yet been translated into actual bills that can be acted upon once they are passed. But the Green New Deal is a wonderful set of ideas for how we need to fight climate change. But even in the drafting of the Green New Deal, they don't say very much about fossil fuels. Lots of people who are proponents of the Green New Deal say what we need is to rejoin the Paris Accords, to bring back Obama's Clean Power Plan, to bring back fuel economy for our automobiles, to invest heavily in wind and solar and battery technology, and change the economy in a way to make it more fair, and that's it. And we say no. The Green New Deal should include a simple statement that says no new fossil fuel infrastructure should be constructed in the whole United States. No new fracking wells, no new pipelines. This means that we not only have to fight Trump and the Republicans, we have to fight the fossil fuel industry, which is one of the wealthiest, most powerful industries in this country and across the globe. According to Oil Change International, almost every government on the planet subsidizes fossil fuel extraction and development big time. In the United States, it's about $20 billion a year in just plain subsidies to fossil fuels. Is that crazy? We are subsidizing our own destruction. if we don't wrestle with the fossil fuel industries and limit their power in a significant way and pass good legislation that prevents new fossil fuels from being extracted, we're not going to make it. I wish Dr. Webbles was still here. I'd like to hear what he would have to say about that. But we really need to wrestle with the fossil fuel industry. And that means passing legislation that would really stop it. There was a bill in the House last year introduced by Tulsi Gabbard, the Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Future Act, and it specifically banned new fossil fuel infrastructure and required the ending of required cutting the subsidies. Bernie Sanders has come out saying those two things: cut the subsidies for fossil fuels and no new fossil fuel infrastructure. So people are beginning to talk about it, but it's not enough. My question to you folks today is, will you help us fight this pipeline? You can go to the website of Soil Save Our Illinois Land, and you can sign up there to be on our email list. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, our next presenter is Mavis Bates. Mavis's passion is taking care of the environment. She is the chair of the Fox Valley group of Sierra clubs in Kane and Kendall County. She is the founder and chair of the Aurora Green Fest, which is getting ready to put up Aurora's 10th annual Green Fest this September 28th. It's an eco-friendly festival that attracts thousands of visitors every year. She helped create Sustainable Aurora, the Mayor's Sustainable Advisory Board, and she is an adjunct instructor at Waubonsee Community College and teaches Sustainability 101, and just earned her master's in Science and Sustainability Management from the University of Wisconsin. I don't know how this thing stays up.
I'm not going to use this. Okay. Hi, so my job is to talk to you about what is the Green New Deal. So it is a plan for transforming our economy to save our people and our planet. So it's hard to do something that you can't even imagine. So I want everybody to close their eyes. You don't really have to close your eyes, but in your mind, close your eyes and imagine what the world would be like if we could stop the climate change problems that we have today. So we know that we have to save the planet. We know it's scary. We try not to be too scared. We try to think about the solutions. I get to give you the good news. I'm also giving you the hard work that we all have to do. But the Green New Deal is good news for all of us. We know that we have the technology to save the planet. We have the means to do it. And we have the money. Don't let them tell you it's too expensive. The budget for the Green New Deal is like in the ballpark of, let's say $200 billion a year. Peanuts. The budget for the military is $750 billion this year. Okay, my research said $700 billion. We're talking 5 times as much, do the math, for the military as for the Green New Deal. It's not too expensive. We can do it. We're the richest country on the planet. So people say that the Green New Deal is too big, it's too fast, it's not practical. I say it's too small, it's too slow, and it's plenty practical enough. We know this is what we have to do. It's the moral thing. If we're not doing it we don't just have to do this for our kids and our grandkids anymore. We have to do this for ourselves, and not even our older selves, our young selves today. So we know that our scientists are telling us that our time is running out. Now, some reports say 12 years. Our congressman says it's a little longer than that. But we know that ExxonMobil and the oil companies knew all of this science decades ago. So we have lost decades of time to make this happen. It's not too late to save the planet, but we better hurry up. We have 12 years to change our way of life, to change everything about our way of life. But even though the oil companies have known about this for decades, they've wasted our time. All this time has been wasted. Species have been lost forever. Natural wonders of the world have been lost forever because those expletive deleted oil companies have known about this and kept it secret for all these years. So we've got 12 years to cut our emissions in half. We need to change everything. So there's 9 broad. So why do they say that the Green New Deal is impractical? Why do they say it's too big? Well, if you're a stickler for details, you don't start with details. You don't start a project with details. You start with a broad brush. We're going to get down to the fine brush strokes in later. But right now we're painting with a broad brush, and that's fine for now. You could even call the Green New Deal a plan for a plan. It's a resolution. It's not a bill. You could sponsor this and hardly anybody would get mad at you. But anyway, here's the broad plan. Supporting our families with a living wage, retirement security, enough family leave to take care of our children and our elderly when they're sick, take care of ourselves when we're sick. There's a health plan in here for health care. But health is not just going to the doctor, right? It's housing, it's clean water, clean air, a chance to go to visit nature. We don't want that nature deficiency. How long do you want me to talk, John? 5 more minutes? 10? Okay. Anyway, all right. I won't talk too long, I don't think. Training and education. We all need training and education and higher education. At least our junior colleges should be free. We don't want our students burdened with these incredible student loans. We need clean energy. There you go, Mary, clean energy. We're going to get 100% clean energy by renewable power and zero emissions. I'm nodding my head to the nukes in the room. Smart grid. We need a smart grid that's going to make energy cheaper. It's going to make it so when you put solar panels on your house, you can sell that energy back to ComEd. We want infrastructure. We need to rebuild our roads and our bridges so they don't fall down around us. Transportation. We need to eliminate the pollution and the greenhouse gases that are coming from our transportation sector. We need to make more charging stations available, make electric vehicles cheaper. Manufacturing sector has to be less polluting. Just think of the wonders we can do when we start making our manufacturing sector less polluting, less greenhouse gases. And ag. We need to work collaboratively with our farmers and our ranchers to make sure that they are doing less polluting, and they can even be sequestering carbon for us. So if we look at, I want to tell you a little bit about our meeting with Bill Foster. We met with Bill today, and it was pretty good. We could take a vote. I would say it was a pretty good meeting. He is a scientist and kind of an engineer and quite the entrepreneur. What he's working on right now, Bill is all in agreement with climate science, no doubt there. His attitude, something that was a little bit frustrating was, he's a smart guy. We all know that. I live, in the 11th. But my attitude, the Green New Deal attitude is, let's do all this stuff in America. His attitude is global. He's a smart guy. So he's saying, what about China? What about India? But I said, what about America? We've got to lead where we can. We've got to lead where we can lead. We can't lie down on this mission. We've got a mission in life, and it's to do what we can do here and be leaders overseas. He said he wants to come up with lots of good technology to help China and India clean up their greenhouse emissions, more sequestration, things like he's working on a grid scale battery system. Yay! But what about today? What about this minute? Okay, so yay, Bill. But but Bill said, and Hillary Dank, his chief of staff, said, we know this is an ongoing conversation, and we said we'll be back. So we're totally going to be back. I'm not gonna. I may put a tent right here. Okay, so we know we have been in dire straits before, right? Oh wait, one more thing. Locally, Illinois we are leading the charge. We are like, if you go to meetings in Denver and they say, how are we going to do this? They say, look at Illinois. I'm not kidding. So Sierra Club helped a whole lot to get the Future Energy Jobs Act passed. That's yay, FIJA. Okay, so then the next thing we're working on, and this is going to come up again in the veto session in Springfield, right? In a couple months, I think. I hope I got that right. But we've got CEJA, Clean Energy Jobs Act, son of FIJA, daughter of FIJA. So what we've got is a new bill coming up. It's got transportation in it. It's got zero emissions. It has 100% clean energy sector. And jobs and family issues. So if somebody says to you, what's the big deal? How come you're trying to put climate change and solar panels into the same bill with Medicare for all? The deal is, when I decided, okay, I'm just going to put on my blinders, I'm just going to be an environmentalist, I thought, I'm not going to worry about poor people. I'm not going to worry about race. I'm not going to worry about women. I'm just going to be an environmentalist, let everybody else, carry the banner. I'll give them money. But the trouble is, poor people are hard on the environment. How do you cut down on How do you cut down on population explosion? Anybody know the one thing you do to cut down on population explosion? You educate women. And it drops like a rock, magically. So anyway, that's why we have to have family issues, economic issues, ecological issues, all wrapped up in the same bow. So we have been in dire straits before. World War II, the whole world mobilized for World War II. The Great Depression, the whole country mobilized. They didn't say, where's the money going to come from? How are we going to pay for it? They said, we've got to pull together. We know we can pull together. We've done it before. We owe it to our children. It's time to kick off our social and ecological transformation to save the planet. We need solutions of scale, and we need this to be the decade of the Green New Deal. Yes. Yes, we can. And I love your shirt. Where's the I can and I will shirt? Oh, there you are.
Thank you, Mavis. Our next speaker is Dr. Vince Gaddis. He holds a PhD in history from Northern Illinois University with over 20 years teaching experience in higher education. Madison? I'm sorry. All right, Madison is next. I'm sorry. She is a recent graduate from Illinois Math and Science Academy, is an 18-year-old incoming freshman at Yale University, and she is involved in various climate organizations such as the Sunshine Movement, Zero Hour, and the United States Youth Climate Strike, as well as gun violence prevention and a political activist in general. Sorry. All right. She's coming from a journalism background, and she tries to use the power of word to help create change. Thank you, Madison.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Okay. So, if I'm just gonna put this here. Okay. So, if you see from my bio, you can see that I do a lot of like activism and advocacy related things. But it's important for you all to know that that was never really my plan. I'm kind of a writer, and so my dream was always to write poems, words that weren't really for anyone except for myself. And I always envisioned living a life of what I would call blissful apathy. So it would be apathy because I wouldn't have to care, blissful because I could look myself in the mirror and not feel sick if I did so, if I lived a life for me and for me alone. So I'm not here today because I want to be. I'm here today because I have to be. Because I'm scared, because I'm angry, because I want to be able to look myself in the eye in 30 years and know that I did everything in my power to combat the climate crisis. And so I'm going to do what I do best because I'm a writer, and I'm going to tell you a story. It's the future, we'll say 50 years from now. And in this future, we listened. Our government declared a climate emergency. Our government passed the Green New Deal, recognizing that climate change isn't just climate change, but intertwined with every single other social issue. For example, how it's harder for those with disabilities to deal with the effects of climate change because this world is not constructed for those with physical limitations, that women constitute a disproportionate number of climate refugees worldwide. In passing the Green New Deal, they recognize that climate change disproportionately affects marginalized communities or those not perpetuating the crisis in the first place. They recognize that we are in crisis mode and that half measures that don't reach their necessary thresholds aren't even worth passing at all. They recognize that the Green New Deal isn't a finish line, but a start. But it's the best start that we currently have. This future was hard. There were floods, there were droughts, there were climate refugees, there was famine, there was death. But humanity as a whole survived, and we thank those who tirelessly advocated for environmental policies for helping us dodge an even greater bullet. In this future, we got through it. In this future, children didn't have to give up their childhoods to beg the government to listen to them. They didn't have to consider whether it was moral to give birth into a world rapidly becoming uninhabitable for human life. They didn't have to lose their home or family business in a flood. They didn't have to see reports on television of people dying by the hundreds due to heat waves. They didn't have to be angry at the adults in the room that failed them, angry at a system that was in place long before they were even born. In this future, they could live selfishly if they wanted to. They didn't have to care. That's one future. The other future, it's hard to imagine, but in that future, we don't get through it. We don't get to live in blissful apathy. Humanity becomes shattered, and it'll start with those in communities without sufficient resources, but it'll work its way up, and we'll all feel it. That future is the one in which we are heading, and it's not some unthinkable speck years down the timeline, but something that we will experience in our lifetime. We already are. There is still time to mitigate the worst effects, but we are quickly approaching the point of no return. So we need to treat the climate crisis like the emergency that it is, which means passing legislation that treats the climate crisis like the emergency that it is. If for no other reason than the fact that in the next election, my generation will be of voting age, and we will vote you out if you don't. So initially, I was going to end by sharing a poem, but I think it would be more worthwhile if we all do a chant together. So I'm going to repeat after me. Ready? I believe. I believe that we will win. I believe. I believe that we will win.
I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. Yeah. Good job, kid. Nice. Good job, Bulldog.
Where
There you
is...
go. Yale's in good hands. Do I need it? I can just go, right? I mean, who cares, right?
I don't have
Okay. That's all right. My name's Vince Gaddis. I'm just a guy. There you go. I teach at Benedictine University, and I've been involved with many different issues, the environment being one. I am a historian, and so I'm going to very quickly give you just a quick, my own thoughts, I guess, on just this whole issue of Green New Deal and the New Deal. Because this is a pivotal moment, and I will return to our conversation with
the congressman in a moment as well. But when the New Deal was instituted in the 1930s, capitalism was in crisis, and a new vision for the economic future was being created. The New Deal was rooted really in a moral decision, and that's what I want to talk about today, right? And that moral decision was that the dignity of work must be protected, and capitalism had to be restrained in order to protect that dignity. Fast forward till now. The earth is in crisis, much as a result from unrestrained capitalism. And so we need a new deal, a green new deal, with a strong moral foundation upon which we can build a sustainable future. During the 30s, the Wagner Act was passed that gave unions recognition and the ability to collectively bargain. When we look at the Green New Deal, it also is very strongly supportive of union labor, knowing that strong unions build a strong middle class. In the 1930s, it was understood that people needed a wage that allowed them to live above subsistence level. 19th century capitalism left the country in a position where over half of the population was living at subsistence level or below. So there was no ability to absorb the kind of economic crisis that came with the stock market crash in October of 29. Fast forward to today. Where are we now? Half of the population can't afford to live. We can't afford a $500 repair. Most people are working 2 or 3 jobs, many with no benefits. And so part of the Green New Deal is about creating new jobs, but at a living wage, so that people can live above subsistence level. The New Deal put people to work on various projects to improve the quality of life and expand conservation efforts. The Green New Deal makes the kind of public investments we need for a zero carbon world. Imagine, wait a minute, now this is really radical, hold on. High-speed rail. Wow, radical, right? I mean, radical. But think of the jobs that would be created with a Green New Deal. High-speed rail, green chemistry, zero waste production, environmental cleanup. Yes, we are making strides in battery technology, but the issue is that we have to get people like Bill Foster to recognize that this is a fight that we all have to be in, and we cannot afford to lose. We're in a position right now that we have. Now, look, I'm just going to tell you, most of my academic work and other things are on issues of racism. But here's the truth. It doesn't matter about racism if we're extinct. Right? Because you cannot get more fundamental than ecological catastrophe. And that's where we're headed. And all of the issues that were brought up by the congressman today about, well, what will India do? What will China do? What about the cost? I am really perplexed about this line of argument. Because if you ask, what's the cost? Doesn't it cost too much? Is the wrong question. The question is, what is the cost of doing nothing? What is the cost of apathy? What is the cost of politics as usual? And the cost is extinction. That is the cost. And so I am honored to be here today to lift my voice with you, to call on people like Bill Foster to have the courage, because we call on Bill Foster to have the courage to say yes to the Green New Deal. We call on Tammy Duckworth to fight the battle for the Green New Deal and pass it in the Congress. We call on Dick Durbin to make this a priority in the Senate. We don't have the luxury of waiting any longer. If we want a livable future for this young man and my grandchildren, we need a Green New Deal. If we want a living wage and a robust, growing economy that can make a difference in people's lives, we need a Green New Deal. If we want a sustainable planet, what do we need? A Green New Deal. If we want stronger unions, what do we need?
A Green New Deal.
If we want better wages, what do we need? If we want a new kind of global economy based in a moral foundation of sustainability and looking out for our fellow man, what do we need? A Green New Deal. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Gaddis. It always is hard going after him. We're going to wrap things up here real quick. We're going to talk about some couple things that we're asking people to do. Number one, right on the table over there, if you have not signed the petition, we are just starting. When we started the fight to protect teachers' pensions, it was about this many people, 30 people in front of State Senator Mike Nolan's office. By the time we got to Darlene Singer, there was roughly 200 to 300 people marching with a petition over to her office. And I think Springfield heard us when on January 2nd, they called a special session down in Springfield, and they had to cancel the special session because we had reached enough lawmakers to stop the process. So now we need to march in favor of something. We don't want to stop something. We want to start something. We want a green revolution, and it's going to start here today. So if one is sign a petition. Number two, we have this sign here for Representative Foster. This is his phone number. We've heard lawmakers say, some individuals out here have said that, hey, we're just not hearing that climate change is an issue. Well, okay, it's time to change that. This is how you do it. You pick up the phone and you call. And we don't just have Bill Foster's phone number here. I've also got Bill Foster, Sean Caston, Lauren Underwood, Raja Krishnamurthy. So you can tell where we're going to be going next. And I should have put Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth on there. But they need to hear from us, and one simple way is to pick up the phone and make a call. Another thing we'd like to do, you know, I just thought when I saw Representative Ocasio-Cortez with her Green New Deal sign, I thought that was hot. And I thought, you know, I'm going to do that. So one of the things you can do is take a selfie with your Green New Deal sign or hand your phone to somebody else, and they'll take the picture and post that on Facebook. It's a conversation starter. Why not? Let's talk to our friends about it. Let's debate them, and let's tell them what we heard here. And let's take this, and we can tell them to call their representative. And that's how we're going to grow this movement. So these are just a few of the tools that we're asking people to pick up to do. And I'm just going to ask if everybody will come back here one more time. Madison, why don't you give it to us, huh? What do we want? What do we want? When do we want it?